Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to a special edition of A Public Conversation. My name is McCarthy Coyle, and if the crew maybe could put that monitor on, I might have a little sense of what's going on. Thank you. We're going to have a special guest coming in shortly in about 5 minutes after I lament a couple of things in the community. Father Alas, who's an international traveler and works very diligently in Central America, and he's visited Montana before, and we'll have a chance to visit with him extensively. Anyway, but a couple of things. I think that, I saw a great performance of Rachel Carson last Saturday night up at the university, sponsored by, and I won't get the title right, but the Northwest Coalition for Pesticide Control and concerns about poisons in the air and the water and our food supply. And they had their regional meeting here in Missoula this past weekend, and a really astonishing performance of the life of Rachel Carson, who was the author of Silent Spring. We have so many good things that come to Missoula like that. I wish the whole community could have seen that, but it was outstanding. And I think sometimes in a community we have a short-term institutional memory, and so I have a confession to make. There's a monstrosity that seems to be rising up at the foot of Chestnut Street in McCormick Park. And you'll recall, some of you will recall last year when there were a number of public hearings and a lot of controversy about a plan to put in some housing on a short piece of hillside there, right by the irrigation ditch, right at the foot of Chestnut Street and First Street. And there was a lot of concern on the part of the neighborhood, a lot of opposition, a lot of concern about design, that it would reflect the neighborhood there. And I had an interesting letter from the owners and builders. This letter was from June of 1992, and it says, "Dear McCarthy, we would like to let you know how much we appreciated the support you gave us during the recent Parkside Townhouse hearings. Your brilliant use of wit and sarcasm could not have helped us more. We achieved the end result we needed with help from people like you." And that was signed by Tom Devaney, Jack Meyer, and while the name is listed as John T. Boyle, I don't see his signature here, so I don't know if he had seen this letter. So obviously, I was the only one. There were like about 40 people that spoke against some elements of that development. I, at the time, was not opposed to some housing development there, but I was very concerned about how it looked, whether there would be housing for handicapped accessible, things like that. But no one else got a letter like this but me. I would say that it's an adroitly written but rather nasty letter. And I guess that they did achieve the end result that they needed. And why don't you go down and take a look at the building going up there at Chestnut and First Street, because it seems totally out of proportion with what was finally what we thought we had agreed to during the city council process, through the planning process. Maybe I have a jaundiced eye, but it's huge. It's out of kilter with the neighborhood, and I don't know what happened during the process of how this finally got approved, but I guess they got what they wanted, and the neighborhood did not. And I'm concerned about the development here that the University of Montana Foundation land sale out by Fort Missoula. The University of Montana Foundation owns almost 500 acres, which they're planning on selling to some developers, and it comes out, the sale price comes out to about $5,000 an acre for riverfront land, for land that abuts a couple of golf courses. I mean, it's very valuable land. And of course, I'm not known for being a very good entrepreneur, but that price sounds like an excellent deal to me. $5,000 an acre in Missoula on the riverfront? I think the foundation ought to think about, whether they can find a buyer who's willing to pay a little bit of a higher price. Now, the University of Montana Foundation said that they are selling this land for which they'll get, I think it works out to be something under $500,000 for scholarships for students and things like that. But there's going to be, at least it's in the offing, that there's going to be a big housing development put in there. And I was thinking, well, if there's going to be housing put in, and we talk about cooperation between the university and the community in terms of our housing crisis, and if students are some of the ones, which they are, who are always looking for housing, isn't an application and a concern for students and their scholarships, isn't housing part of that? And shouldn't we be looking, and shouldn't that foundation be looking, and shouldn't that developer be looking at putting in some novel and innovative scholarship housing? Let's think about this. I mean, why do we have to do things in the same old way? Why can't we look at some new ways of doing things? And I think that the community ought to take a very close look at that land deal and the housing deal, and think about some interesting student housing there as part of the deal. And our guest, Father Alas, will be coming on soon, but I just wanted to call attention to the lead news story in the New York Times of the 1st of November, just less than 2 weeks ago. This is the lead story. Key Haiti leaders said to have been in the pay of the Central Intelligence Agency. And the aides to President Aristide are very angered, and the payments from the CIA show that their own CIA attacks on Aristide have been one-sided. And what I'll just touch base on this a little bit here. This is the lead here. Key members of the military leadership controlling Haiti and blocking the return of its elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, were paid by the Central Intelligence Agency for information from the mid-1980s, at least until the 1991 coup that forced Mr. Aristide from power, according to American officials. You know, I don't understand why, according to the United States Constitution, all budgets have to be approved by the United States Congress. But we suddenly have, not suddenly, for the past 50 years, we've had this interesting exception to the United States Constitution, in which the CIA budget and the budget of the, what's the other one, the Defense Intelligence Agency, is basically an unknown figure, anywhere from $37 billion to $50 billion. So we have secret hearings in the Congress. We don't know what's going on until we find out that our tax dollars through the CIA are going to the leaders, these military people in Haiti. It's a disgrace. It's anti-constitutional. Well, enough of myself complaining and calling attention to. I'd like to welcome Father Arras into a public conversation, and welcome him to Montana. Yeah. It's good to see you.
Well, it is very nice to see you.
Have a seat, please.
Thank you.
And Father Arras has suggested that I should use his more familiar name, Chencho. That's a nickname that you go by. And Chencho has been to Montana before. How many times have you been up?
Well, 4 times.
4 times. And Chencho has a birthday coming up soon. And I was teasing him earlier. I said, well, by his appearance, we could be running him for the United States Senate. He has that very distinguished white hair. And but anyway, Chencho is originally from El Salvador in Central America, but he's traveled all over the world. He's studied in Canada, in Quebec, in Rome, in Belgium, and he's lived and studied anthropology, cultural anthropology in Ecuador, in South America. He lived for many years in Nicaragua, and of course he lived in his home of El Salvador, where he still has family. He has 3 sisters still living in El Salvador, and I also think that it's a funny and strange and small world that somehow we may have been in close proximity to one another. I was traveling in your country in 1969 in El Salvador, but I must have been innocent because I went all through Central America without worrying whether I was ever going to get in trouble, and I fortunately did not. So, tell us what you're doing these days, your journey to Montana, and yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Well, I have been in Montana 4 times, and certainly this is one place that I love a lot. The people of Missoula are so great. They have been helping me during a good period of time with the projects that we have had in Nicaragua and with the projects that we have in El Salvador. So that is why I am here. I have received not only moral support, solidarity with my people, but also I have received financial support for the projects. So the interest of visiting this town once again is to be in touch with these people that are so great, to raise funds, and also to approach some of your foundations that have to do with the environment, because that is something very important, not only for this region of the world, but I would say it is more important for El Salvador, that has been almost completely destroyed in its environment.
And the name of your organization is the Institute for Technology, the Environment, and Self-Sufficiency.
Yes.
It's quite a mouthful. And what is it that you're striving to do, or what are some of the things that you have been doing?
Yeah. Well, why the title? The first of all, we think that following the peace accords after the war in El Salvador, our people are entitled to have the land, at least the land that they have been occupying. These poor peasants, they have some kind of knowledge, indigenous knowledge, about how to plant. But they can increase the productivity of their land if they introduce new technologies, or if they are trained in technologies that there is respect for the environment and there is enough production, especially of food. So one of the main goals of the institute that I am representing is to do a research about the indigenous technologies, so how we can innovate new things and transfer them to the people or peasants or women, and thinking about economic sustainability. That means that we do not destroy the land, we do not destroy the air, we do not destroy the water. That means that between we human beings and the nature, that is a relation, that is a lovely relation, that the nature takes care of us and we take care of the nation. That is like to be in a community in this planet. And self-sufficiency because, well, you know, our people for years and years didn't have the control of their own things. So if we speak about self-sufficiency, we are not only speaking about economic self-sufficiency. We are speaking also about political self-sufficiency. That means power for the people. So they can participate in a society that must become a democratic society. That is why we include the self-sufficiency concept for our institution.
Mm-hmm. And where are you based now, Chencho?
Well, I am based in Texas. There is a wonderful bishop in Austin, and a priest who I know since 5, 6 years ago. And as they knew that I was moving to the state, they offered me a house in Round Rock, that is 20 minutes from Austin. The institute is based in San Salvador, and from San Salvador we do the work in the countryside and also in the city. So I am partially in San Salvador and partially here in the States.
And then you have, and you also have something on the ground happening in Nicaragua as well, is that?
Not anymore in Nicaragua. I was working for Nicaragua for 8 years.
Mhm.
I started the Central American Foundation. That is a foundation that is present in every one of the Central American countries. That means the 7 Central American countries. Belize is part of Central America, also Panama. And we develop very good projects
Mhm.
in that region.
Mhm. What could you describe could you describe, let's say, something that's actually happening in El Salvador as a result of, you know, your project, your work? Could you give us an example of?
Yeah. You know, during the 50s, the Green Revolution was introduced. That means the use of chemicals, pesticides. My country is a country that produces cotton, sugar, beef, coffee. In the cotton plantations, as we have been using chemicals, little by little the insects have become adapted to those chemicals.
Mhm.
And in order to kill them and have a good production of cotton, what the planters have been doing is to put more chemicals and more pesticide to the soil. The result of that is that the nutrients, the organic nutrients of our soil are destroyed, the water is polluted, and the air also. So now that many of these people that were suffering from the war and they were living in Nicaragua, in Honduras, in Costa Rica, in Panama, here in this country, or Mexico, or in Europe, or in other places, people who are back in El Salvador, well, they are living very near to these places where rich people were growing cotton. So they have contaminated water.
Mhm.
So one of the projects that we have been trying to develop, and that is something important for their health, is to try not only to have water, but also to purify the water. So with the assistance of Nicaraguans, we have, for example, a pump that is called a rope pump. That means you have a rope, and following the rope, they are small cups that goes into the water. It has a wheel, and even a child can have water, you know, from the well.
Mhm.
But then we need to teach them how to purify the water, because the water has DDT or has other chemicals. Well, speaking about this project that we have developed, we built 6 of these pumps. And we brought these pumps to the villages, and they were happy with that. The Bishop of Sulutan came to visit one of the villages. He saw this pump, he was happy, and he talked to a European representative of an agency, and he said to him, well, we can finance 1,000 of these pumps. So the bishop came to us and he said, well, I need 1,000.
Mhm.
And we said to him, well, that is a completely different technology. You can't make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is in some way easy. But if you go to 1,000, you are speaking about something that I would say is like a small enterprise. So for that purpose, we need a metal shop.
Mhm.
I was talking about the need of this metal shop to a group in San Francisco called the Appropriate Technology. That is a project of Earth Ireland, and I am leaving your city on Saturday. I am going to Dayton, Ohio. There is a group of 4 people in Dayton that wants to support us with this metal shop. What we need is $49,000. Well, really, what we need is the machinery.
Mm-hmm.
We do not care about the money.
Right.
So if someone is hearing me and has tools and wants to give this tool, that is what is important for us, not the money.
Does everybody,
Because-
everybody hear that? We need tools to build pumps. We don't need money unless nobody has the tools, and we have to buy them ourselves.
Yeah, and not only to make the pumps, it is to make many other things that are required to support the transfer of technology
Mm-hmm.
to the peasants and women and other people.
Mm-hmm. You said you wound up in Texas because there was an hospitable bishop there. Is that right? And I just have to ask the naive question: because over the years we read about clergy in the Catholic Church working in Latin America that are not always enthusiastically greeted by the powers that be within the church. Does that ever pose a problem for you, or?
Well, it is a problem. I studied in Rome during the time of John the 23rd. I was ordained in Rome with a German and a French. I introduced the new liturgy
Mm-hmm.
at the Gregorian University, that is the Vatican's university. With the Second Vatican Council, we thought that we had just the right message to present not only to Christians or Catholics, but to present to the whole world, especially if we talk about the last document of the Vatican II, that means the Gaudium et Spes, the joys and the hopes of the people. We had the second conference of the Latin American bishops that was held in Medellin in 1968. The bishops very deeply present to us the justice and peace situation in Latin America, and with all these elements that were bringing light to us, to our way of thinking, and bishops like Proaño in Ecuador, and many other bishops in Latin America, and later on, like Romero in El Salvador, Bishop Romero. Well, we thought that the church was really closer to the gospel, to the message of Jesus. But things have changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And the church of John the 23rd is not the church that we have today. Until now, in many places in the world, and especially I would say in my country, El Salvador, they are priests who are very close to the people, that they do not care if they need to sleep in the floor of a peasant or eat the beans and the rice that they eat and the tortillas. People who know about human rights and they defend the human rights of our people. People who have a global approach to the world, not only to El Salvador. And those people, I would say, are the prophets that we have in the country that continue doing their work. And at the same time, we have bishops, for example, the one of Sonsonate, that I do not know if he's a colonel or he's a bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's hard to understand him, his statements. Someone's really, it hurts the heart of our people.
Mm-hmm. You're referring to a bishop in Cincinnati, you say?
In Sonsonate, that is in El Salvador.
Ah, okay.
In El Salvador, yeah.
Okay.
One of our towns.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get your impression, because of course, as you can see, I'm an avid news junkie. I'm always reading the newspapers. But really, Central America, which was on the front pages of U.S. newspapers for so many years, we read very little anymore about what's going on. Can you give us a picture of how you see the peace accords working out, and maybe start with your own country, and then maybe giving us your appraisal of Nicaragua as well.
Before that, I will give you a small story
All right.
that I really love dealing with this issue. I was in New York, and I was with a union leader. He organized some lectures in one of the high schools in New York of dropout students. When I came to that place, to that high school, my impression was, not the best. That was about 7 years ago. I saw these students, the girls, for example, with all different colors in their head, red, blue, green. I said, my God, I will be talking to these people. And then I saw the boys, with their rotten trousers, walking like this, It was not easy for me. So I said, well, this is my task, to talk to them.
You mean you didn't think they would be a very understanding
Yeah,
or appreciative audience?
Oh, yeah. And I said, well, these are not people who read the papers or do not watch television. So I started asking them, well, what do you know about Central America? What do you know about El Salvador? And back in the classroom, there was a girl. And she started saying, well, I am absolutely disappointed with the way how foreign affairs are done here in this country. I do not agree with the funds, the money that is given to El Salvador, to the army, to the government, to continue the war in El Salvador. And then there was a black boy, about 21 years old, and he said, tell me, why El Salvador is not anymore in the news? During the 80s, when the church women were killed, and when Archbishop Romero was killed, El Salvador was front page. Why not? And I said to myself, my God, these people really read the papers. So I go everywhere to your country. For this tour, I am visiting 11 cities, from San Francisco to New York, up to New Hampshire, down to Texas. And something that people demand me, why Central America, why El Salvador is not in the news? Well, it seems that only when we are fighting, or only when people put a bomb in one of these huge buildings in New York, or only when there is a lot of blood, then people are in the news. When we are trying to have a better environment, and when we are trying to bring technology to poor people, we are not in the news. Well, I would say that very soon El Salvador will be in the news. In 1994, we will have the elections for president, mayors, deputies, and 20 representatives to the Central American Parliament. For the moment, we have been living in peace since we signed the peace accord 20 months ago. But now, the death squads are active in El Salvador, and they have killed 2 Salvadorian commanders of the guerrillas, who are not anymore commanders. They were members of the FMLN, the new political party that came from the guerrillas. They have killed 14 more people since July. The army is once again in the streets, in the roads of our country. I have been many times in my country, and I have seen them, walking and walking and walking. They said that it is because the crime has gone up, but I would say that is once again to put some psychological pressure to the people thinking about the elections in March. Certainly, the peace accords have brought to us peace. And certainly, with the peace accords, many of our peasants have land now. And the Treasury Police, the National Police, that were the most brutal forces
Mhm.
that we had in El Salvador, they are over. That means they do not exist anymore. That means there are changes in El
Mhm.
Salvador.
Mhm.
But I would say that it is important to continue watching El Salvador
Mhm.
because if you supported with your solidarity the transition from war to peace, now we need to go from peace to democracy, to justice. And that is something that you, the North American people, can do for us. To write to your congressman, to your senator, to the State Department, to your president, to your ambassador in El Salvador, and tell them
Mhm.
that the U.S. people are watching El Salvador. That that is the only way, how we can flourish in
Mhm.
democracy.
Mhm. What's the who is the American ambassador there now?
I do not know his name.
Okay, so well, I mean, I think that maybe that's an example that there's so little. I mean, usually I would that would be a name that I would probably know because I'm a trivia master. But the fact that we're talking about where they're not in the news and you're less aware, I'm less aware than of
Yeah, yeah.
who's calling the shots or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, something that I want to tell you
Mhm.
is that the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador is one of the biggest in the whole world. It's a new one.
Mhm.
That is a fortress.
Mm.
That is not an embassy, that is a forest,
Mm.
a fortress.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
What you mentioned? You touched on a Central American Parliament. Now that's a new one for me.
Well, the Central American Parliament has been in existence for about 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every country is supposed to elect the representative to this parliament. That comes with the Central American Peace Accords.
Okay.
And it is based in Esquipulas. That is a town in Guatemala,
Mm-hmm.
very near to the border of Honduras and near to El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
Esquipulas is the center for our pilgrimages in Central America. There is the statue of Jesus in the cross. That statue was sculpted by an Indian, and the body of Jesus is the body of an Indian.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great statue,
Mhm.
really beautiful,
Mm.
really beautiful.
That sounds exciting. So people, so it's a pilgrimage site, and that
Yes.
happens also be to the place where
Yeah.
the parliament
Yeah,
is situated.
It's like the capital for Central America.
Okay. So it must be, if it's just 6 years old, they must still be just accumulating their influence and things like that.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. It is important for the Central American Common Market to
Mhm.
have a body like that. Also to watch the human rights
Mhm. Mhm.
in Central America,
Mhm.
and for many other purposes.
Mhm. I recall that when I made my trip to Panama from California, and I had an old '53 Chevy pickup truck, and I drove it all the way to Panama without a jack. I didn't even have a jack in the car. So I'm either crazy or stupid. I guess stupid. But I only had one flat, and that was in a village. But I just my picture before I began the journey and as I started out through Mexico, well, my picture of the geography and the highway came from my 4th grade, geography book in American school, and they talked about the Pan American Highway. So I thought I was going to hit a big ribbon of concrete, right, and just get on it in Mexico and just drive that truck right down that ribbon of concrete all the way to Panama. Well, I learned something, that there was there was a Pan American Highway, but most of it was dirt road. So it was quite a journey.
Well, as you are speaking about your pickup, in our office in San Salvador, we had a pickup.
Mm-hmm.
I say we had
Mm-hmm.
because about 15 days ago, the director was driving to come to the office. That was a 4-wheel drive pickup, to visit the villages
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
see the projects. Well, 5 gunmen came. They asked the keys from him.
Mhm.
They didn't hurt him,
Mhm.
and they left.
Mhm.
So now in our office do not have a pickup.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if someone is hearing me and he wants to give a pickup to
Mhm.
my office,
One 4-wheel drive pickup, folks, please.
that's good. We need that. We have 6 professionals, you know.
Absolutely.
We have 2 engineers, mechanical engineers. We have 3
Mhm.
biologists
Mhm.
that have been doing research in
Mhm.
one of these shrimp
Mhm.
farms
Mhm.
that belong to peasants. The water is contaminated, so we need to do a research about what is the kind of contamination of that of those ponds.
Mhm.
But if they do not have transportation, I say they are like a wounded dog in the pond, you know,
Mhm.
sitting over there.
What? How is transportation, let's say, farm to market, or in El Salvador? I mean, what? When you talked about, I don't think you used the word cooperatives, but there's these peasant-owned land now. So how are they getting their goods to market?
Well, they are people in the towns
Mhm.
that have trucks,
Okay.
and some of the peasants have their mules or their horses.
Mhm.
And those that do not have
Mhm.
anything, well,
Walk, right?
they
on their
walk,
back,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, and they
Mhm.
put in their bag
Mhm.
what they are
Are
they are
bicycles
bringing.
are bicycles something
Very
that
few, but now there is a foundation
Mhm.
called CESTA
Mhm.
that is for the environment, and that is one of the main goals that this foundation has to introduce bicycles in the country.
In which they would build them there
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that is something that we need.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is a nice way of transporting
Right.
goods, you know, or
Mhm.
transporting themselves.
Mhm.
And we need that.
And now I noticed, like just here in Montana recently, now we're one of the agricultural co-ops out here in the Bitterroot Valley is offering for sale, organically grown coffee, and they said in their brochure, the Montana, outfit said that they also were particular in purchasing their coffee beans from farms in which they were confident that the working conditions of the workers were good ones. So that's all I know. But is there is the question of organically grown coffee? Does that come up in El Salvador? I mean, because there seems to be a growing market for it.
Yeah. Well, there is a German group
Mm-hmm.
that is assisting some cooperatives, and they are teaching people how to grow organic coffee.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is becoming more and more common.
Mhm.
It will take time, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
When I say time, it means maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years.
Mhm.
To introduce the Green Revolution, it took to us about 30 years.
Mhm.
So to change from
The
chemicals,
yeah.
pesticides to organic farming, it will take a lot of education.
Mhm. Mhm.
But certainly, there is that kind of interest in some of the groups. And I would say that is something that is becoming global.
Mhm.
For example, I learned from a professor in Berkeley during this trip, Berkeley University, who has been in Cuba, that due to the present economic conditions of Cuba,
Mhm.
they do not have any more the support of the Soviet Union, and there is the U.S. embargo against
Mm.
Cuba. That is the only country in the world that have shifted from chemicals to
Mm.
organic farming.
Mm.
And I heard also from him that they have done research about indigenous technologies
Mhm.
that existed in Cuba before the revolution. And also the other country is China,
Mhm.
that is trying, to do its best.
I mean, I'm a very much a layperson when it comes to, agriculture and environmental matters. But but many years ago, I thought to myself, wait a minute, I could see the growing market for organically produced goods, and in light of that, I couldn't understand the enormous resistance on the part of the American national corporations and multinationals that we're resisting this. And I thought, well, this is stupid. You know, I mean, don't you see the market coming down your way? Why don't you, help, promote, organic?
Oh, yeah, but it takes time, to shift from one kind
Yeah.
of. That is the same when people were. The light was the coal,
Mhm.
and then they went to electricity.
Mhm.
I remember once I was in a house in a small hotel
Mhm.
in San Francisco, and I saw a note, near the electric, the
Mhm.
how you use the switch,
Yeah.
and it said, "Watch, electricity is bad. It can harm you." Now people will laugh about that,
Uh-huh.
but
Right.
they maintain this, only because that was,
Mhm.
yeah, before
Mhm.
this century or at the beginning of the century when they introduced electricity.
Mhm.
People were scared.
Mhm.
So every time that there is a change, people are scared. Those who are heads of corporation, they are scared that their income can become down,
Mhm.
for the meantime.
Mhm.
Well, but
Mhm.
for sure, the war will come to that situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are there any corporations that have assisted you in your work?
Not corporations.
Mhm.
What we are trying to do, well, inside El Salvador,
Mhm.
the National University is assisting us.
Mhm.
And the Lutheran University is a new one, and it has a department of eco-agriculture.
Mhm.
And here I have been talking to people of Iowa University, to Berkeley University. I was also in San Francisco State University. And I approached someone from Evergreen College of
Oh,
Washington State.
mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there is interest,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I hope that
Mhm.
we have their assistance.
Do you have any computers in the office in El Salvador, or is there any reason for you to have them?
Well, I bought one,
Mm-hmm.
a good one,
Mm-hmm.
and they are happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have is only one,
Mhm.
and for 6 professionals and the accountant
Mm-hmm.
and 2 more people that are working in the office, one computer
Mm-hmm.
is we need more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about? Are there any of the people in El Salvador? I mean, are there what we in America called alternative newspapers or things like that, where you're putting out your own information, where the people are?
Well, there is one Diario Latino
Mm-hmm.
that is trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the corporations and the big people, they do not want, to publish their ads,
Mm-hmm.
their classify
Okay.
in that paper. So that paper is trying,
Struggling.
to
Mhm.
struggling.
Mhm.
That is the only one.
Mhm.
And also we have the Radio Venceremos
Okay.
in San Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
That is the radio that belongs to the FMLN. That
Okay.
was the radio that was very active during
Right.
the wartime.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
still broadcasting.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that a 24-hour a day operation? Or?
No, not really.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
but
Right.
yeah.
What's the situation of women in El Salvador?
I tell you another story
All
about
right.
this. There was about 1,500 people living in San Antonio, Honduras, as refugees during the war.
Right. The village across the border,
Yeah.
just across the border.
Many
Mhm.
of these people were women.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't know, about the rights of women
Mhm.
and the oppression of the women. There were people coming from Europe to assist them from North America, Canada, and other places.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a French woman who approached them and said, well, what do you think about women?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know what to answer. So she said to them, well, I have a book that has to do with women. And they said, well, we want to read it. And these women in San Antonio, they started reading the book, and they were very happy, with what they were reading. Once they moved to El Salvador, with the support of the Lutherans from Sweden,
This
the
is when they
Lutheran
were
Church,
returning home.
returning
Yeah.
home. Well, they bought a land in the place is called Nuevo Hualcho. They are about 1,400 people living over there. And do you know, these same women that were in San Antonio, and they had developed, you know, an awareness about the right of the women, their rights, they are now heading, they are the heads of this settlement, Nuevo Hualcho. And every committee, with the exception of the security committee for this village, every committee is headed by women. So it is great. And that is happening in other places too. But until now, the majority of the Salvadorian people, of Salvadorian women in El Salvador, are oppressed people, especially by their husband, and also by the laws. We do not have laws that protect the women and the children. We have very few laws.
And what about literacy?
Well, 57% of the people are illiterate, and of those who know how to read and write, I would say that functionally, maybe 10–15% know what is the use of reading and writing. So really, we are in a country that is illiterate country.
And we can return to El Salvador, but what can you give us any sense of what's? I mean, I actually compared to El Salvador, I probably am more appraised of some of the conflicts in Nicaragua. What do you see going on in Nicaragua?
Well, for me, the situation of Nicaragua is one of the saddest. It is so sad to see what is happening with Nicaragua at the present time. People were happy when Violeta Chamorro was elected. Of course, the Sandinistas, they were terrified because they lost power. They thought that they would continue. But in general, for the Nicaraguan people, they thought, well, with the election of this woman, that is the end of the war.
Right.
There is peace. The U.S. will lift the embargo.
We're moving into a democratic process.
And we are, yeah. What happened with her? First of all, as the Sandinistas continue in the army, the U.S. government didn't give enough support to Nicaragua. And also because your country has been great to support wars and not development. That means once they win a war, they are happy with that. And they do not care about what happens to the people, So in one side we have the Sandinistas at the present time. In one side we have the people who belong to the far right in political parties. And then there is Violeta Chamorro with some political parties that until now are supporting her. Instead of trying to build the economy of the country, and instead of trying to create avenues for democracy, instead of trying to maintain what the Sandinistas created that was good, and to put afar, what was bad, what they have been trying is to fight for power. With that, what we see in Nicaragua is that the economy is down more than ever in the history of Nicaragua. I was living, my next door neighbors were two doctors living with their mother and wives and children. During the Sandinista time, their mother said to me, we were able to buy 4 chickens for a week. Now what we are able is to pay for one for 15 days, and we eat beans and rice and corn, doctors. So it doesn't matter who in Nicaragua, professionals or peasants or workers or women, with the exception of those, who are rich, people are really suffering.
Mhm.
The hospitals do not have medicine. They do not have the resources to repair their roads.
Mhm.
The schools are in shame. Everything is, well, Nicaragua has become maybe after Haiti, the poorest country in the Americas.
Mhm. I need to take a breather.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, I remember Nicaragua. I mean, it was poor to begin with, and even when I traveled there in 1969, the inflation, I can remember the difference between. As soon as I traveled into Nicaragua and stopped even at a little, roadside cafe, just a poor little cafe, and the price of a bowl of soup or whatever was quite expensive relative to what I had been paying in other countries in Central America. And I thought, my gosh, if I'm noticing this, and they weren't boosting the price up because of me,
Yeah.
because I was a tourist, that was the price that everyone was expected to pay. And I thought, even though I was traveling on a limited budget, I said, my land, I said, if I have to pay this, I mean, this, it was clear that. It was clear that it was a very struggling and poor country.
But
Even then.
when the Sandinistas came to power with the approach to economics and also to to social issues, what they did was to lower the price so everyone would have food, everyone would have transportation. I think that I know about a little bit about economics and about finances, and I think that with their idealism, what they did was too much. Because, for example, I had a van, and with $3, I could fill the tank of my van. In El Salvador, I would pay $35. In Nicaragua, for the same gallons of fuel, only $3. And rich people and poor people were paying the same. Of course, they were receiving this at the beginning, this petro from Mexico and from Venezuela. Later on, as they couldn't pay to Mexico and Venezuela, they were receiving the petro and the gas from the Soviet Union. But when you build a country, you cannot come, so down to the prices. You need to maintain, to recuperate at least what you are putting, So that happened with the Nicaraguans. But at that time, even if people were in line to buy their food, they had food. Now you have beautiful supermarkets with goods produced in Florida, or they bring goods from Panama, chicken, eggs, ham, etc., that they import from Florida. But who are the people who can buy that? Well, very few. So that is the problem.
What do you hit times in your life and your work in which the blues sets in and where you're down?
Yeah, sometimes yes. Well, last July I was down. I sent money to El Salvador for the administration. We bought a computer, an IBM, with the scan, with everything. I sent too much money down there. I was left with only $3,000 for my work here, and also expecting to send more money in August to continue the administration, the projects. And there was a time at 2 o'clock in the morning that I was thinking, well, it's hard to continue this. And my God, I was praying, I was sad, and I didn't know how to continue. Then I said to myself, why I do not write a project for institutional support. I wrote in 3 days a proposal. I sent this proposal to 10 people, and once again, the great heart of some of the North American people, there was a family that sent me $25,000, another family $15,000, a friend of mine from Chicago $7,000, and with that I went down back to El Salvador and I said, well, we have money to continue, and we continue with more projects. We bought a tractor with money given by people from Seattle. We bought a tractor for San Pablo, El Ceretal, near the Suchitoto. That was the place where I was working. That is a tractor for $28,000. So sometimes I am down, but sometimes I am up and very up.
Well, let me ask you maybe a slightly more personal question. What, in terms of like, if I hate raising money. I mean, I'm famous for not raising money.
Yeah.
I don't have any money. Money stays away from me. I always think, God, that's a hard job, and not one that one really wants to do in one's heart. I mean, when you think about a time when you say when someone else is doing this, let's say, for you, or on behalf of your organization, what do you see yourself doing?
What I would like to do
Yeah.
about my life?
Yeah.
Well, certainly, to raise money is a hard thing. It is not easy. And as I said, sometimes I become discouraged, sometimes I am happy. But what I would prefer to do is to teach, maybe in a university, and also to write. When I was young, I was writing, and I would like to go back to that. And I hope that once the institute is strong, I can come out, from that kind of work and start writing.
What would you see yourself teaching about the areas that you've worked in your life? And
I would like to teach more than anything else about cultural values, changing cultural values, that we would call that the cultural revolution that is required, It's required to have a better vision about our faith, about the environment, about sustainable development, about many things that have to do with people and with the nature. I would like to teach also about liberation theology. Many people think that liberation theology is inspired by Marxist ideas. People who say that are people who do not know about liberation theology. They must go back to the Exodus, the second book of the Bible, and they will start learning liberation theology. Liberation theology is not new. It has to do with the liberation of the Israelis when they were slaves in Egypt.
And are these the things that you would choose to write
Oh,
about
yeah.
as well?
Yeah. Well, I want to write a book about my own experience in Suchitoto when I was working with the peasants for 8 years, and the process that we follow from evangelization to social demands to politics.
And that was in what country?
In El Salvador.
Okay. And what kind of a we got to wrap it up. Just got a minute or so.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm enjoying this so much. I could go for another hour and really get down to the nitty gritty. But I want to thank you so much for coming home to Montana, and we hope you'll come back. And best of luck.
Well, thank you, Greg.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks to the
You
crew.
are in the back of this.
Right. You're
Beautiful.
behind.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Terry and Ray and Greg and Cindy. And we'll pump up the music, and we'll depart the set, and we'll see you next time for a public conversation. Thanks for tuning in. Okay.